Thanks a million for coming along today. As Lucy said, this is our information clinic for the Culture Moves Europe Individual Mobility Award. I'm Aoife Tunney, and the head of the Culture Office, and my colleague Lucy Tevlin. And also we're joined today by Leona Cully from the Creative Europe desk. We're delighted to have Róisín and kind of looking forward to hearing from her in a few minutes. I'm just going to do a little introduction and a brief overview. So I'll come back to the details of the award itself, obviously, after Róisín has her presentation. So just to look quickly at what the Creative Europe desk, what we are and what we do. So the Creative Europe desk Ireland has 3 offices, the media desks in Galway and Dublin, and then the Culture Office, which is based in the Arts Council of Ireland, is in Dublin. So we are an office that has a few kind of areas of programs of work, I would say. And what we really do is provide information around European funding, specifically Creative Europe funding, for the audiovisual and culture sectors. So obviously the Culture Office is more dedicated to the culture sector itself. And as part of our remit, we promote diversity and inclusiveness and sustainability as well. So we'll host various a program of events across the year, and we'll build in those areas of diversity across our program. We will develop and advise. So we work with the sector closely. Obviously, we do have our information clinics, but then we'll kind of get closer into the details of specific awards. We'll develop funding applications. We can help with partner searches across Europe. And we have our tailored advice for every specific application. Across our program, we also like and need to kind of collaborate and network with other agencies in Ireland. So you'll see us working with the Arts Council, obviously, with the Culture, Creative Ireland and other agencies around European funding. It is an important part of our work to encourage cross-border cooperation and working with the sectors to incentivize them to be international, to work internationally across Europe. We're going to just play a little video now, and this is the new video of the Creative Europe Desk Ireland. Hopefully you can hear it.
There's no sound.
Sorry, we can't hear the video.
You can't hear it. Well, I mean, it's a musical background, but it stopped there actually in the middle of it. So you know what? We'll leave it and we have it on our website if you want to have a look at it. So I'm going to try and just move on to our thing. Yeah. Wait now a second. I'm just going to have to go back in because it stopped for a second. Yeah, okay, so here. No, that wasn't what I wanted. Sorry, excuse me. Okay. So anyway, that was it's our kind of marketing video of the desk and the funding that has come to Ireland. So it is a really nice video if you get to look at it of all the up-to-date projects. Anyway, to get back to Culture Moves Europe, this award is a mobility award, as you're aware. It came out of an Opportunus, which was a pilot award set up by the Commission in the last program, and it was so positive and had such a great impact that they launched Culture Moves Europe, and it's a permanent action now. So it promotes mobility across the 40 European Creative Europe countries, supporting individual mobility, and another call for residencies. So there are two actions: the individual mobility and the residency hosts. So the award itself contributes to travel and subsistence costs, offers top-ups based on different situations for your application. That could be a green mobility, that could be a family support, or applications from people with disability needs, which is great to see these kind of opportunities for different situations for artists trying to travel. The award is funded by the European Union, and it is managed by the Goethe Institute. So what I'll do now is I'll stop sharing, and I'm going to invite Róisín to come and share her presentation. If she can, that'd be great. And I'll mute myself.
Thanks a million. Hi, everybody. I hope you're all well, and I hope that this is playing okay. Let me know if not. So my name is Róisín, and I am going to chat a little bit about my experience from a strategic and a creative and a personal perspective today. So just a little bit about me. I'm a theatre maker and writer. I'm based in Ennistimon in County Clare. I'm interested in making contemporary work and playing a bit with form. And my piece, No Woman is an Island, which this is an image from, it premiered at Dublin Theatre Festival last year. So I suppose first question, you know, why Europe? I'm sure people have different answers for that. And if you're on this call, you already know why Europe. But I think it's a kind of an interesting one to ponder at the same time. For me, I've been very influenced by contemporary theatre. So that image there is from Gunilla Heilborn, who's a Swedish artist. That show was at Dublin Theatre Festival several years ago. So for those of you not involved in theatre, in Ireland, theatre is still quite literary. It's still very much about the script and the writer. And in other countries, that's less so, and particularly in Europe, where they have different approaches to theatre. So that's kind of been a big draw for me as an artist, is work from Europe in particular. And that was a big reason for me why I've been looking towards Europe for a while. Also, obviously, there's some really good funding in Europe. There are some countries where arts funding is quite significant. And I suppose in thinking about myself as a business model, you know, I have one income stream pretty much, and it's the Arts Council, whether directly or indirectly. So I started thinking, well, you know, really, wouldn't it make sense if I had collaborators or co-producers or different opportunities to make my work or have my work funded abroad? And so I should start making inroads. And Europe seemed like probably the best place, really. And then I suppose over the years, you know, like all of us, I've been over and back to Europe since I did exchanges in school and then holidays and whatever. So I had just a very positive experience overall. So I kind of applied in 2019, and this picture is an attempt to illustrate where I was at that point, kind of shouting into a bit of a void. I was really not sure what I was doing in terms of my practice. I'd only recently left a job to kind of make my creative practice full time. And so I really only had one show of my own making under my belt. I'd lots of other work with people. And so I was looking at websites like On the Move. If you're not familiar, it's a great resource for international and European funding, and Artist Res, which is a directory of artist residencies. And I was really just trying to kind of get out there and expand my references, and expand my possibilities for myself as an artist. So I was applying to a lot of stuff and I wasn't really getting much back. I was quite surprised actually when this organization in Norway replied and said, yes, we'll give you a month residency. And it was a great, it just gave me a great lift as an artist to feel like, okay, so I can kind of play on that more international field. So I got the residency at LKV. I won't insult them by trying to pronounce the title. So it's in Trondheim in Norway, which is north of Bergen, and I'll chat a little bit more about Trondheim in a few minutes. And the way that they program, it's a 3-year rolling. So while I applied in 2019, I got the residency for 2022. And it was a brand new multidisciplinary residency. Their main focus had always been visual arts, so they were now trying to branch out a little bit. And I got offered a month residency, but as you can see from this dramatic, totally unposed photograph, a slight change of circumstance in 2021 when I got pregnant. So I contacted them and was like, look, I'm not going to be able to go. I'll be just about to have a baby in 2022. It's not going to happen for me. And of course, being totally lovely and Scandinavian and super progressive, they were like, it's totally fine, just come another time and bring your baby and bring your partner. And I was like, oh my God, amazing. So I knew in 2023 I'd probably still be, fairly encumbered by having a small baby. So I rescheduled it for 2024. And at that time, it was between whether I do a month or whether I do less. I ended up doing 2.5 weeks for reasons I'll go into. So when all of this was happening, Culture Moves wasn't really a thing. So as Aoife kind of indicated, it started in 2021 and it was just a pilot opportunist before that. So I didn't really have any knowledge of how I was going to fund it, because travel and training, which as you may remember, the Arts Council Award was a great award, that stopped around COVID and never came back on stream. So I didn't really know what I was going to do. So I was delighted then when Culture Moves launched in 2021. So how I approached the application then was, because it's a fairly lengthy application, so I suppose I was kind of thinking about what's going to make this more compelling than a residency, which is completely valid. It's totally fine, obviously, to just go and say I'm doing a residency, but I was just trying to think of ways to make my application a bit more competitive. So I contacted other artists. I'd actually contacted some before applying for the residency, not just Culture Moves, if you see what I mean. And a couple of them got back in touch. So I was able to talk about what I was going to do on that residency. And I contacted a couple of arts organizations in Norway. Not all of them got back to me. But around this time, when I was applying, which was 2023, that was 4 years since the application. So a lot had happened. I'd made more work and my practice had kind of evolved, and I'd gotten an agility award to internationalize my practice. So I was in touch with different producers and programmers, and I was able to feed that into my application in terms of strengthening my reasons for being there. I contacted Aoife and had a good chat with her. One of my queries at the time, in the FAQ, it seemed to be stating that your residency needed to be a month, and then that there was maybe a different application for residency. So I had some confusion around that myself, and Aoife was able to clarify that for me. And I suppose I thought about my own interest in Norway and Scandinavia. That is a question that they ask in the application. So for me, I was able to speak back to some of those influences like Gunilla Heilborn, Iggy Mamborg, Vesterport, a lot of kind of Scandinavian Nordic influences. And I attended a festival in the Lofoten Islands, an experimental theatre festival with the Travel Training Award in 2019. So I was able to kind of tie all of that in together to show that this wasn't just some totally random stab in the dark, but actually that I had an interest in that kind of in the culture there and in the contemporary scene. And I had a Zoom with Rebecca, who's running the residency at LKV, and was really useful. So and she put me in touch with people as well, and I was able to, I suppose, articulate exactly what I would be doing and what the setup would be. And read the FAQs, and like the application form is fairly long. So yeah, I guess I would just maybe flag that that it's a long enough kind of a form. So my residency aims when I applied in 2019 were to work on a project about Stoicism. But as I say, a lot changed in the meantime. And surprise, surprise, I am currently making a piece about motherhood, which, as you can see from this image from a workshop, is very, very serious piece. And I also was accepted onto the Pan mentorship to create a piece around mental health and family caring inspired by protest art. So with the residency, I was getting a writing desk in the apartment, but I asked them for a studio because the mental health project was working with lettering and typography and live postering. And, you know, most theatre practitioners, we work in usually windowless rooms, but certainly rooms that you can't really get that messy. So it's not the same as having, you know, a visual arts studio. So I was really delighted when they said they'd be able to give me a studio for a week. I'd also decided at that point to go solo. So for any artist parents that are on the call today, like, you know, it's a big question of what's the right thing to do for you artistically, for you as a family. And for us, you know, where I was going was 3 flights actually on the way home because I flew into Shannon. So that was logistically quite difficult to do with the child. And then realistically, what was my husband going to be doing in another country with a 2-year-old? Because you're away from all of the familiar things and toys and people and the stuff that you need. So we made that call for me to go on my own, which was very, very difficult emotionally, but hugely beneficial at the same time. So I'm just going to say a little bit about LKV for anyone who might be interested. It's a former school. As you can see from this picture here, it's quite large, has over 30 studios. In the basement, they have an amazing array of technical rooms. You can do fabric making, screen printing, a dark room. It's really, really impressive. And then there's a lovely big light-filled kitchen that's kind of communal. And then they run a gallery. So just behind this building, there's a big public park, and just across from that, there's the gallery. And then the Rosendahl Theatre, which is kind of the more contemporary, sort of like maybe the Project Art Centre of Trondheim. That was quite nearby, and there's a lovely cafe there. And it's not in central Trondheim, but Trondheim is quite small, so you're only 10 minutes really from everything. And directly across from this building, there is the gymnasium, and that's where the artist apartments are for visiting artists. So Trondheim itself, you can see from this picture, I mean, this is making it look a bit more rednecky than it actually is, but it's kind of a regional city. It's just north of Bergen. It's very much an visual art town. So they have a big visual art academy, and they've quite a good few galleries. Like for its size, I think comparative to Irish cities, they've quite a lot, and supply shops. It's in the Trondelag region, so there will be a lot of Sami culture and different villages and areas that you can go and see. And it's a student town as well, so it has a bit of a nightlife if that's what you're into. So in terms of my residency experience, this was the studio. I mean, this is only half of it that I was given for a week. So that was really amazing. As I say, coming from not a visual arts background, it was really, really beneficial. The other international artists that were there were primarily from a visual arts background from Austria, Denmark, and Brazil. I got to present my work to the visiting and the resident artists in LKV. We had some informal dinner and nights out. I got to see an awful lot of exhibitions because there was galleries, there was graduate shows, and that was really informative for my practice. There was a dance festival on. But aside from that, there wasn't really a lot of theatre. It's not actually much of a theatre town. So it was an interesting opportunity for me to just kind of take in other influences, I suppose. And I got to have meetings. I got to meet with the producer of the dance festival and producer at Rosendahl Theatre, as well as just the more informal conversations with local artists as well. So it was just kind of a mix of, I suppose, social and creative outings, and then a lot of solo time as well, of course, in the studio and at my writing desk, which I have to say was in a tiny apartment. So I'm really glad that I didn't bring my family, because it wouldn't have worked at all. So the main benefits, I suppose, creative benefits, I really got to experiment with approach. So as you can see from this picture, was just written with kind of like dirty water, I suppose. And as I said, that piece that I was in the studio with was really about playing with lettering and posters and creating live scenography. So I was looking at different materials, different inks and paints and ways of making text appear and disappear and smudge and drip. And so that was, that was really, really amazing, because I couldn't really have done that if I'd been working at home. Because I wouldn't have been in a space that would have been permitted that. Learning about others' practice and also the local arts infrastructure. So Rebecca, who runs LKV, is an amazing advocate for local artists, and just the way that they run that space and the way that they the way that they run contracts, and they're constantly reviewing and consulting with artists. It was really, really inspiring. And really interested in independent artists and kind of trying to level the field for independent artists, which is something I'm very interested in myself. So I had some great conversations with them around that. And it's all also very interesting because, we have these ideas that it's always better in another country. They've loads of money in Belgium, they've loads of money in Norway. But, I was at a talk there about accessibility, and people were saying that Norway is still quite far behind. And so sometimes it's just good to get that perspective as well. So I got to develop the two projects, the writing of the motherhood one and the studio time with the mental health project, which really drove along it really started to take shape. And again, making connections. So one of the producers that I had a cup of tea with there of the Roosendaal Theatre, I then ran into at a festival in Utrecht a few months later. And so you kind of feel like you're starting to create a bit of a network, which is really nice. And space as time as an artist is always really valuable, but as an artist parent, it was just massive. Like as gut wrenching as it was to leave, I have to say that once I got there, it was like my mind just did this big unfurling kind of yawn, and I suddenly had all of the space in my head that I'd be given over to, okay, when is she going to eat? Do I have enough food? What time is nap? No, 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 no. Like I didn't have to think about any of that anymore. I was just able to be an artist, and it was hugely valuable. It really felt like such a gift. So then just in terms of more practical information for anyone who might be thinking about going this direction or looking at LKV, obviously Norway is expensive. I think my grant worked out at 84 euros a day. Can't remember if that's standardized or if it's slightly adjusted depending on where you're going. I just ate a lot of pasta and crackers, really, and probably came home with money in my pocket, to be honest. I think as artists, we're very good at cutting our cloth to suit our measures. So that was fine. Keep your boarding passes and receipts. You'll know that anyway from any info sessions, but what I would do is I would take a picture of them and maybe send them to yourself just in case you have any phone trouble. I kind of learned that the hard way. I had a really terrible time flying with SAS. That's a whole presentation in and of itself, so I won't go into that now, but if you do end up flying with them, good luck. So anyway, so just make sure you keep your boarding passes. Literally from the point of view leaving your house to you arriving where you need to arrive, anything to do with that. So it's not just your boarding pass, but train, petrol, bus, anything like that. That's kind of what they'll ask you for in your final reporting. Final payment is quite slow. I don't know if I was unlucky or if it was because of summer, but I submitted my report in early May, mid-May, and I they only got back to me last week about that. So just if you are relying on that money, I think it's only, can't remember what percentage it is, 10 or 20%. But just so you're aware, there is a parent payment, as Aoife said, it's 100 euros. So it is definitely something. We spent that on childcare so that my husband could have a couple of extra days support while I was away. So, stuff like that is really, really useful. So then I suppose just from kind of a personal learning point of view, I've already talked through how I managed to progress projects because of different influences and because of the spaces that I was given there. It was good for me to test the residency length. I went for 2.5 weeks. I think personally for me that was a little bit long in terms of being away from family and in terms of my own, I suppose, creative rhythm. Distance and travel, there was a huge learning there. So when I applied for this residency, I was living in Galway, very easy to connect to Dublin Airport. Now I live in Ennistimon, totally different story. So that is something that I would factor in if you live rurally. You know, what's the kind of most stress-free way? As I said, it was 3 flights for me to come home. You know, it's kind of tiring and expensive. And you know, there are the green initiatives that Aoife mentioned. We're slightly disadvantaged here, but if you do have time and you can get the ferry, like, you know, that's also a great thing to look at. Obviously, going to Scandinavia, that would have taken me quite a while. That I didn't have that kind of time. And I suppose the other thing I learned as well is thinking about strategic locations. So as I said, when I applied in 2019, I was much earlier in my career, but you know, practice. And I was just kind of keen to get anything and to get a foothold. And I'm really glad that I did. But at the same time, you know, there actually weren't that many opportunities for me to meet co-producers or collaborators in Trondheim. So I totally intend to apply for Culture Moves again. I think I'd be a little bit more strategic next time. You know, where is a place where I can try and cultivate those opportunities for myself, but that's also realistic in terms of where I'm at as an artist. You know, I'm not going to just go over to Vienna and expect to get like an opera commissioned, you know, so where am I kind of at? And I would, that's the way I would be thinking the next time I apply. So yeah, I think that's kind of everything. I hope that's been useful, and I'm going to stop sharing now if I can find my little cursor. There we go.
Brilliant. Róisín, that's really, really brilliant. So such a great presentation, and I loved all of the personal stuff obviously as well, because as you know, we're not robots, and we all have lives, and you know, you got to consider those elements, particularly if you're a parent, but even as you say at the end, the strategic kind of avenue. And I know, as you say as well, that kind of opportunity came up and it was good to jump on it and kind of build a connection. So it depends where you are, I suppose, in your practice and what makes sense. But it is kind of getting a foot in the European arena as well, and then you can kind of build on that. Thanks a million. And I really think I mean, I would actually take out the rest of our information clinic and just put you up on, because it is amazing, and the best way to get information is to actually hear from an artist, you know, themselves. We've had people before, and it's just the best way of hearing how you did it, you know, and getting some kind of tips. So thanks a million, Róisín. So I'll keep going and just kind of follow on with the actual more kind of technical stuff. So let's just see where we are. Sorry. Yeah. So as I was saying, I'm going to just move my thing over. Okay. So just to look at the award itself, I mean, as we've heard from Róisín, she is a practicing theatre and writer artist. So this award is for individual artists and cultural professionals. So cultural professionals could be curators, producers, writers as well in other areas. So it doesn't have to be particularly an artist, but a cultural professional working in the area of the arts. So it is wide reaching, which is brilliant. So it's an open award, and even though the application form is long, as Róisín mentioned, it's really good to know and hear those kind of bits of detail. In general, as an award, as an application process, it is a simpler award. So we're kind of promoting it in that way, in the sense in comparison to other awards. So as we go, so it is for an individual artist or a group of maximum of 5 artists or cultural professionals. So you can go as a group together, and one person applies on behalf of the group. Applicants must have a mobility project, and that includes 3 elements. So it's 1 international partner, 1 project, 1 destination. The participants must be at least 18 years old and a legal resident of a Creative Europe country. And these are the areas that the sectors, so it's music, literature, architecture, cultural heritage, design and fashion design, visual arts and performing arts. And design and fashion design and cultural heritage are new additions. So this is brilliant. And we can see in a little while some results which show that these kind of areas are definitely ones, people are applying from those sectors. So what is the purpose of the award for artists and culture professionals? Two of the following project objectives need to be selected when you're applying. So to look at these and think really what's suitable to what you intend on doing. So you could be looking to explore your practice, to conduct creative and artistic research, to investigate, inspire, and work on a specific theme or a new concept. You could be looking to actually create within your artistic processes a new piece of work, a new piece of cultural work, or kind of all of the above, just a new creation wherever you want to go. To learn, and learning can be as wide as well, learning from other collaborators, other artists that you will be working with, but it is to upskill and do those kind of those activities, but it's a non-formal learning. So if you wanted to really look into the detail of what non-formal learning is, we've a hyperlink there. But really it is not like a master's or a doctorate or anything to do with that. It is more, workshops and that kind of thing. You could be looking at connecting. So as Róisín says, the really working within Europe and making those professional connections is really part of the process and developing on that. So working with other collaborators, producers, curators that you can tap in with, and they'll be useful and helpful and can be creative with you along your kind of process. What is the individual grant? So what does it actually pay for? For your daily allowance, as Róisín said, hers was around 82 or 85 euros, she said, I think, per day. So that was probably calculated in terms of the cost of living in Norway. But it is a gauge around 75 euro per person per day. And that's a contribution to your accommodation, your food, renting equipment, local transport, and things like that. So your travel is also calculated. So under 5,000 kilometers, you get 350 euro per person for your round trip. And if you're traveling above, so 5,000 kilometers plus, it's 700 per person for the round trip. So looking at the duration and the travel. So the individual artist or cultural practitioner, you need to state the case and definitely for how long you want to go, but it needs to be between 7 days and 60 days for an individual artist, or between 7 and 21 days for a group of artists. The implementation of the project in this destination country must be uninterrupted. So, unless there's a serious, a kind of good excuse why you needed it to be interrupted, you go for the full trip at one time. For the travel for under 600 kilometers, traveling by airplane is only allowed in exceptional cases. So for persons with disabilities, for traveling from or to an island with no ferry connections, or due to force majeure or grave personal circumstances. So obviously something very much out of your control. The distance between the participant's place of residence and the host's location is calculated automatically here. So there's a link there, but this is done within the application process as well. So top up. So looking at the green top up, as Róisín mentioned, we're kind of at a disadvantage here. But if you were choosing to not travel by airplane, you would get 350 euro per person, but it's only applicable for 600 kilometers plus. So that's obviously you have to take in the time for that. And I think Rita Marcello is on the call here, and she would have chosen to do a longer trip, but then it was definitely going to take time to not be flying. Overseas countries and territories or outermost regions, so you get €150 per person if you're traveling from there. And if there is a visa as part of your process to come or wherever you're coming from, you're offered an €80 per person for the expenses related to that. As Róisín said as well, there's a family top-up of €100 per person with children below the age of 10. And then a disability support of up to €75 per person per day for people whose disabilities affect their ability to carry out the mobility project. So these are all built in within the application, and you can see more details I'll show you in a moment with the actual call document, but just as an outline or an overview. Looking at the criteria. So really, if you're planning now your application, even if you're going for the one at the end of September, it is to think through how the panel or how it's going to be viewed at the other end. So thinking through your resident project, is it relevant to your work and your activities? So really thinking, knowing your practice, knowing where you're coming from. I mean, even if this is a kind of break off or a new area of work, that you're really able to describe that and build in, how you're going to do this new piece of work, or if it's a kind of continuation of your practice already, really building in and being relevant to your plans, your practice as a whole. Does the residency project have long-term impacts and benefits? Yeah, looking at how it relates back to your process, your own practice, but then, what are those actual benefits? What is the impact? As Róisín kind of highlighted there, it was looking at the connections, the people that she met, those kind of new relationships building, and then teasing out and working on her practice and being kind of more brave to try things out and being experimental. So what are the impacts from that? Will it kind of feed back into your overall practice? Do you actually require to travel for this project? Could it happen in your own country? So really looking at how you're kind of proving that this is really important to be in this particular place and meet and work with these particular people. Are there sustainable aspects in the mobility and the implementation of the project? So if obviously specifically if you're looking for the green top up, you're trying to be sustainable, then you need to elaborate and work in what are those aspects in your project. And really looking at the planning of your mobility. As Róisín says as well, it is a competitive process. It isn't, it isn't something that you just kind of pull together. So it really needs to be well planned. You need to have your weeks set out. What's your plan overall? What do you want to achieve? Who are you going to be working it with? And all of the above. The other thing is, I thought it was interesting what Róisín mentioned was that she contacted, those other kind of organizations and artists within the region or within the area, and people she could be working with, and then building in those inspirations, those influences from the area she was going to. And all of this kind of stuff makes your application more competitive, also more compelling, and more, that you've actually worked on it, and you're really eager, you're really interested in this particular area or this particular kind of group of people. These are all the things to be thinking through now. And that feedback or that criteria is actually coming from the commission, so that is actually how they will view your application. So over the last 2 years, or the last 2 calls, we've had overall, the Culture Moves Europe had 1,800 recipients. So out of all of the applications, which is nearly 5,000, there's been 32 or 42% successful applicants. And sorry, 32% is in the next slide, but 42% have requested green top-ups. 350 applications requested a family top-up. 37 were traveling from overseas. 18 selected applicants received additional funding for mobility needs. So these are all the kind of areas where we can see the call is working. You know, the call is people are actually asking for the green top-up. They're asking for the family and the mobility or disability top-ups. So there are more results there. You can go through them yourselves. I won't be spending all my time just looking through these, but out of interest, we can see here that Ireland has had 46 successful applications in the last two calls, over the last two calls. And if you look across this graph here, as a really small, you know, as a small island, we are doing pretty well. So it's great. We're obviously doing something right, and continue to help you to be successful in this award. And we can see that these are all the sectors. Now, this is from the second call. It is not, you know, not surprising that visual arts is one of the bigger chunks here in the blue, and performing arts and music. But then we can see that architecture or design and fashion design, you know, and cultural heritage are also doing well. There's a gender split of the application. So there are other nice little bits of information there on the results if you wanted to have a look. So when we're doing these information clinics, we give you the overview, we give you the detail of the award itself, and obviously we'll have case studies and all of that. But what we always say is you need to go into the document, and the current document, the most up-to-date document, which is provided. There's a link there, but it's also on the Goethe Institute, and it's also on our website. Just make sure you refer back to that. Make sure you fully read it, because you know, you want to give yourself the best chance, and you want to have the most up-to-date information. How you apply is you go on the Goethe application portal. We've the link there, and these are the steps. You'll be creating an account, registering yourself, and then clicking on the kind of the call itself. You fill out the form. As Róisín said, it's a long form, so be ready. But you can save and kind of edit as you go, which is always helpful. You will have a response between 6 and 8 weeks after the monthly deadline. So make sure you don't apply, or you put in your mobility can start before 60 days after the monthly deadline. So give yourself enough time to hear back, and then being kind of planning to start it after those 60 days. And the mobility project period is for a year from the signature of your grant agreement. So you can take it up within that year, but it has to happen before the 30th of April in 2025. So these are the deadlines, and really they're towards the end of this year. So it's obviously one coming the end of September, the end of October, and then the end of November. And then they will issue new deadlines for 2025. What we always say is don't leave it till the last month deadline, because there's increased competition. And we kind of, we know that people now maybe in September are only kind of getting back to things, and maybe they mightn't apply for this month. But either, you know, so what we're saying is just go for the earlier month. Don't leave it to the last window, because everyone will do the same, and you'll have more of a chance if you go earlier, if you apply earlier. So just around this one, there's an upcoming event held by the Goethe Institute and in collaboration with Julie's Bicycle around environmental sustainable training. So this is key for the Culture Moves Europe award, and how you can kind of build in those sustainable aspects. We will be doing a cooperation projects information webinar in the 20th of September, if that's something that you're looking at. And also we'll have an autumn newsletter with all of the events, the various kind of things we're going to be presenting at, and then our own events, information events, etc. So sign up there. yeah, and as Lucy said at the beginning, do get in touch. We're always here through our emails. We have all our other information clinics and workshops on our YouTube channel there. The link is there. And then through all our social media, Leona Cully is our communication manager. So she does all our updates all the time. So it's a very active we're an active organization on platforms. So do check us out on those platforms. So I'll stop sharing now and we can have time for questions and answers, and we can say thanks to everyone and thanks to Róisín.